Video about MMORPG tier list 2022 by TheLazyPeon. Currently I'm trying to find out one of the best MMORPG. Like currently I'm playing World of Warcraft. I'm trying to find another good one by March, so I'm making video related to this. Let's go ahead and watch this tier list and see whether it has good games than World of Warcraft.
2021 drawing to an end, I thought it'd be a good idea to wrap up this year with a big MMORPG tier list. So in this video we'll be ranking 41 different MMOs from S tier to F tier. Bear in mind the MMOs included on this list are the ones that I generally consider to be the most relevant, although there's a few I wanted to include just for fun. Apologies if I didn't include a certain MMO you're interested in, and the order of this list is based on my own personal preferences. But before we begin, a quick word from today's sponsor. Genopets is the first move-to-earn MMORPG that will allow people to earn crypto and level up their NFT monsters through real-life exercise. Think Pokemon Go, but with each monster being an NFT that you can trade with other players, battle with, and level up by connecting the Genopets app to your health wearables, gaining XP whilst you work out. Genopets is a project built on the Solana blockchain. It uses the Gene token, and NFTs for this project can be found on ftx.us and magiceden.io. I've already minted my own Genesis egg for this project, and I think the whole concept of earning extra money through exercise is pretty cool and might be a good motivator for some people. To find out more about Genopets, click the links in the description below to visit their official channels. So, starting with S tier, this would be an MMO that I would want to dedicate my whole life to playing, an MMO that makes me not want to go outside, and an MMO that would keep me entertained for years, and unfortunately, an MMORPG like that just simply doesn't exist. There's a lot of good MMOs out, but there's nothing that I would consider to be vastly superior to anything else. An S tier MMO, in my opinion, would have to be non-pay to win. It would have to have a long-term sense of progression that would keep you wanting to play for years, massive open worlds, an even mix of both PvE and PvP content, and it would have to be massively popular. Hopefully one day we can get an S tier MMO. I'm personally hoping Ashes of Creation will be that game for me when it eventually releases, but it's still a long way off, so this tier is left blank. Moving on to A tier, these are going to be our current most popular MMOs, good mix of PvP and PvE content, also relevant in terms of player base. Let's start with Black Desert Online. Incredible action combat, beautiful graphics, massive open world, a decent mix of PvP and PvE content, although it does land more on the side of PvP at endgame. The game gives you a long-term sense of progression, the life skill system is fantastic. As a Korean MMO, the game's coming after your wallet pretty hard. And whenever I play Black Desert, I'll have fun for about a day or two, and then I'll get bored of just grinding the same mobs in a circle over and over again. Guild Wars 2, good mix of both PvP and PvE content, horizontal progression, so it's very casual friendly. The game's about to drop a new expansion pretty soon, so I'll be jumping back into that. Guild Wars 2 has the best mounts of any MMORPG I've ever played. The whole transmog collection, map completion aspect of the game is also really good. Guild Wars 2, one of my favourite MMOs. Final Fantasy XIV, probably the best MMORPG out there when it comes to story, massively popular MMO. It's just dropped a new expansion. The game has a really cool player housing system, it's quite popular with role players. The character models in this game look really cool, and it also has some really unique classes, my personal favourite being the Red Mage. Can't bring up Final Fantasy XIV without bringing up World of Warcraft. Both of these games have extremely difficult, high-end endgame PvE. In terms of gameplay, I'd say I prefer World of Warcraft just because the combat and movement feels more fluid and responsive. World of Warcraft also feels more open world than Final Fantasy XIV, as Final Fantasy XIV's zones are kind of instanced. Final Fantasy XIV's story absolutely blows World of Warcraft away though, and WoW doesn't have player housing. Lost Ark, as far as top-down MMORPGs go, this easily has the best combat out there. Extremely difficult endgame PvE content, competitive endgame PvP content. This game's going to be a massive success when it comes to the West, and is already a proven success in Korea. Albion Online, free-to-play, top-down, cross-platform, sandbox MMORPG. This game has a really great economy and marketplace. It's a full loot MMO, but you're kind of given the choice whether or not you want to participate in that type of content. The game has some really unique features, such as its corrupted dungeons, hellgates, and the monsters in the world, the longer they're left alive, they just get stronger and stronger, eventually giving more and more rewards. So if a monster's been left alive for like a day, it's going to be super rewarding to whoever kills it. I just think that's a fantastic idea. And if you're a PvP or MOBA player, I think there's a lot about Albion that would appeal to you. Personally, I'd love to get into the competitive endgame aspect of Albion, but the biggest issue I have with the game is that it has one server based in Washington DC. So for me playing from Thailand, I've got 250 ping, and it's almost unplayable on a competitive level for me. Old School RuneScape's another one. I played this game since I was a kid. It was one of my first MMOs alongside World of Warcraft, and it's still going strong today. The game still gets constant updates. It's got a really great dev team that understand the community, a good mix of both PvP and PvE, as well as some of the most unique MMORPG design on a fundamental level that has kept people playing for years. I've said it before on many occasions, I wish one day someone would make a third-person Old School RuneScape, because the game's just proven to be timeless. World of Warcraft Classic's still a great game to this day, and I personally prefer WoW Classic for the feeling of being an adventurer out in the world, rather than being the chosen one, as is the case with WoW Retail. Final game that deserves to be an A tier for me is Elder Scrolls Online, another solid MMORPG, decent player base, good mix of both PvP and PvE content, really good storytelling, fantastic sound and voice acting, and the game's done a fantastic job of redeeming itself following a really rough launch all those years ago. Arranging A tier from the order of which I prefer to play each game, and I think it's going to go something like this. Moving on to B tier, the MMOs that have the potential to become A tier, or MMOs that were previously in A tier but have lost relevance over time. The first game in B tier's got to be New World. I could rant about New World all day. I put in over 600 hours at this point since release, and I'm now at the point where I've just kind of stopped playing it due to some decisions made by the devs, and the economy being a complete mess. The review I made for this game had the longest pros and cons list of any other MMO I've previously covered by far, but hopefully one day New World can pull an ESO and move up to a solid mid-A tier game. Next in B tier, RuneScape 3 still has a decent player base, but I do prefer Old School RuneScape over it. RuneScape 3 is a weird game. It's got a good mix of PvP and PvE content, fun mini-games, fantastic quests. There's a lot of good aspects about this game. I do personally play it sometimes as an idle clicker, but for me where the game feels weird is with its combat system. It's a different combat system to Old School RuneScape. The devs have designed some pretty intense, difficult PvE encounters, but the engine uses the same slow tick rate as Old School RuneScape, so the combat just doesn't feel responsive. Until they improve the tick rate and to make the combat more responsive or overhaul the combat entirely, I can't see RuneScape 3 gaining any more relevance in the next few years. Star Wars: The Old Republic, still a relatively popular MMORPG. It's recently released a new expansion. It's got player housing, mix of PvP and PvE content. For me, I'm not really too big into sci-fi MMOs. That's why it goes in B tier. It's just personal preference really. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would put Star Wars in A tier, but not for me. For C tier, we're going to start with Arcade. This game's had a recent boost to its popularity due to the publisher being changed from Gamigo to Kakao Games. Arcade has some really fantastic aspects about it, such as the massive open world, the boats, the sailing on the vast sea, the fishing, the real space player housing, the fact that you can have illegal tree farms and plant trees out in the world. It's a really cool game, but I just feel as though it never really reached its potential. The two biggest problems I have with Arcade, number one being its labour system. It's just fundamentally kind of handicapped the game. People just create a bunch of alt accounts to get around the labour system and get really far ahead due to this. And the last time I played the game, the thing that caused me to quit was that there was no end game content that brought guilds together multiple times per week. The game doesn't have Black Desert nodes or Castle Siege system, for example. If Arcade didn't have its garbage labour system and had a PvP endgame similar to BDO, it would probably be at least mid-B tier or possibly even A tier for me. Although I also remember being incredibly frustrated by the sheer amount of dailies you had to do to progress your gear at endgame. Hopefully they've fixed that now though, I'm not sure. Next game on C tier, Elion, kinda similar to Arcade, more of a PvP focused MMO, although it does have PvE content. It's made in Unreal Engine 3 though, so visually the game just looks out of date immediately upon release, even though this is a new MMO. Also going to put Terra on C tier, another Unreal Engine 3 MMO made by the same devs as Elion. Terra just looks a bit outdated nowadays, and it's definitely lost relevance and popularity, so C tier is about right. Blade and Soul, it's got to be somewhere between C and D tier. I think we're going to go C tier due to the recent Unreal Engine 4 update. That has helped modernise the game quite a bit, so it does feel a lot nicer to play now than it did before. The combat system in this game still feels absolutely fantastic, incredibly fast-paced, impactful and well animated. As a Korean MMO, game's questionably monetised, but it does have equalised 1v1 PvP. So there's that. I think I'd rather play Blade and Soul over Terra, so we're going to put this right here. Swords of Legends Online 2021 Chinese wuxia MMORPG. C or D tier? I think we're going to go C tier because the game does have good graphics, the combat's pretty good, it has player housing, and as far as I remember the game didn't have any pay to win the last time I played it, which was pretty impressive for a Chinese game. I like that C tier is just filled with Asian MMOs, most of which have good combat, but kind of lacking in other areas. Moving on to D tier, we're going to start with Vindictus. Fantastic, fun, fast-paced, impactful action combat with big anime titties. However, the game is super lacking when it comes to the massively multiplayer aspect, the world is incredibly instanced, and it just kind of looks a bit old now. Bless Unleashed, we're going to put this in D tier. This game released earlier this year on Steam, made in Unreal Engine 4, so the graphics are okay. The combat's decent, although it feels a bit clunky. The best thing about this game though is the world bosses. The world bosses in Bless do feel pretty cool, they're massive, and lots of players go fight them. Other than that though, the game feels quite generic and soulless, and I also didn't feel immersed whilst out in the world. Lord of the Rings Online, people do actually still play this game, it's super old, and if I was to make this list 10 or 12 years ago, it would probably be up there in C, B, or maybe even A tier, but nowadays it just feels like a charming, nostalgic, old school MMO. Lineage 2, another old school MMO, absolutely massive back in the day, had castle sieges, some really cool features, super popular game, but it's just a bit old now. Rift is another D tier MMO, really cool MMO when it first released, but lost relevance over the years, not too many people playing nowadays. I think the same can be said for Aeon, Neverwinter, Guild Wars 1 and Secret World Legends. These are all games that were at one point super relevant, pretty popular, and just solid overall MMOs, but they've just kind of lost relevance over the years and just become a bit old. Some people do still play these MMOs, but they're nowhere near as popular as they once were. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, this is going to go in D tier for me. A little bit biased, I just don't really like sci-fi MMORPGs, although the game has decent combat and pretty good graphics. I just found it a little bit forgettable, personally. Final MMO for D tier is DC Universe Online, similar to a few other MMOs in this tier, just not super relevant nowadays. E tier is a bit of a weird one, these are just going to be niche games that I don't really know where they would fit on this list. EVE Online is going to be one of those games. I've never actually played EVE Online. I know people have been requesting that I try it so many times in the past, but the game's super complex. It's sci-fi, so it's not that appealing to me. And from the gameplay I've seen of it, it just doesn't look like my kind of thing. But I know it's massively popular and it's been around for ages, and there's also these legendary stories that come out of the game of massive 1,000-player battles and stuff like that. So, cool game, just not my kind of thing, and I don't really know where to put it on this list. Mortal Online 2 is another one for niche tier, extremely niche MMORPG. I tried it earlier this year, and there were aspects I liked, but I didn't play the game enough to have a full opinion on it, so we're just going to put it here for now. Gloria Victus, basically Mount and Blade 2, the MMORPG. Realistic medieval PvP MMO, big, large open world, revolves around territory capture. Pretty cool game, I covered it recently on the channel, but extremely niche MMO. Warhammer Online is going to go into niche tier. The official version of this game was shut down a few years ago, but people do still play it on private servers, and it did have a decent sized player base the last time I tried it last year. Raiders, another shut down MMO that I tried recently that people do still play on private servers. This game had fantastic combat for such an old MMORPG. I'm also going to add Adventure Quest 3D and Trove to niche tier, two MMOs that I wouldn't want to play personally, but if I had a son aged 7 to 10, I would probably let him play these two games as they're both good introductory MMOs that don't really take themselves too seriously and they're quite light-hearted. F tier, MMOs that I really didn't enjoy. I'm going to put Crowfall as the first one. I just didn't really get this game. I absolutely hated how the world looked in Crowfall. I don't like the art style, the combat felt mediocre, and the user interface was absolutely horrendous. I can't really see Crowfall being around too much longer. The game hasn't had a single profitable month since release, and the game doesn't really have a very big player base, which is something it needs to function. Riders of Icarus, whilst it does have a few redeeming features, such as its mount collection, mount combat, and decent tab targeting system, it's just a super generic, outdated looking Asian MMORPG. Astelia Online, similar to Riders of Icarus but with worse combat, and instead of mount collection, it's more about pet collection. Skyforge, boring worlds, boring combat, average graphics, pay to win, not many players. Revelation Online, a pay to win, generic Chinese fantasy MMO that couldn't even be saved by numerous giant titties throughout the world. And finally, the absolute worst of the worst MMORPG ever played by a country mile has got to be the League of Angels Heaven's Fury. If you've never seen my video about this game called Genuinely the Most Awful MMO, that is not clickbait. This game is horrendous to the point where it's absolutely hilarious. I highly recommend you check out that video. In fact, if I was to have an extra tier, Z tier, that's where League of Angels Heaven's Fury would go. But that's going to do it for my end of 2021 MMORPG tier list. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't take it too seriously, it was just meant for a bit of fun. Everyone's got their own preferences when it comes to MMOs, and the biggest takeaway is there's nothing in S tier, which means I'm just kind of floating around currently between various different games that are placed in A tier, and sometimes a few games in B tier. I'd actually be really interested in reading about your own personal MMO rankings of 2021, especially where you guys would place New World on that list. So leave a comment below, social media on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay guys, in this one, in my favorite list, Final Fantasy 14 is the first one, because I don't know about the other games. I'm sure this must be better than that, but I never tried this. In this even, okay, to be honest, I only know like 3 or 4 games from this. Final Fantasy 14, World of Warcraft Shadowlands, World of Warcraft Classic, and I'm surprised he preferred Classic over Shadowlands, so I'm gonna try Classic as well. Currently I'm playing Shadowlands. I never tried, like I played Classic long ago, but I gave up. But people are still playing the Classic one, so I want to give a try for that. Final Fantasy 14, World of Warcraft Shadowlands, World of Warcraft Classic, New World, and that's it. Those are the 4 games I know. So if I list according to my favorite, I tried Final Fantasy 14 in PlayStation 5. I didn't have a good impression on that. Like I still like it more than, I still like the World of Warcraft Shadowlands more than the Final Fantasy 14 when I play in PlayStation 5. I think it will be good in playing PC. So by March I'm gonna try that. These 2 I already tried. I know this is a very good game. World of Warcraft is one of the best game I ever played, and the New World is coming up, and most people are saying it still has a lot to improve. So in my opinion, the one I'm going to choose is Final Fantasy 14, and list your favorite 5. Like if you are playing MMORPG, list your favorite 5 games in comment section, and also if you can provide the order, that will be better. Let's actually see what's the comment section saying about it. Prediction for next year: New World moves to the A tier, Lost Ark moves to the top 4. Okay, yeah, New World has a lot of potential because it's created by Amazon, so they can literally hire the best people and improve it. So New World has a lot of potential. Yeah, these two I have to make sure, like this Black Desert and the one previously before Final Fantasy version. I'm interested in knowing more about this. Let's actually see some other videos in my next videos and figure out about these things. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys.